Good afternoon, my fellow colleagues, maybe my present as well as maybe my former colleagues as well. Distinguished guests who are here, thank you for spending this Thursday afternoon here listening to me. I'm glad to be able to share some thoughts on family justice and why in this field we need an approach that is different from the typical court proceedings in the non-civil cases. I begin with what the court's role is. Court proceedings are normally associated with dispensation of justice. And what do we mean by justice? Fairness, right? Justice is fairness. Justice is the equitable distribution of rights. Yeah, possible. Righting a wrong, that's justice. But is it anything more than this? We are probably quite used to the notion that court proceedings achieve justice through a vindication of rights. Not of righting a wrong. When you want to go to court, you want to go to court to fight. My rights have been breached, so see you in court. I'll sue you and I'll make sure that justice is done. So justice becomes this idea that you've got to right a wrong. But this understanding of justice is probably incomplete for family disputes, for family proceedings. And why? Well, first of all, if you think about our lives, we go through many stages in life, right? We are born, we go to the registry to get our names registered. We get sick, we go to the hospital. When we get married, we go to ROM. If an elderly person loses mental capacity, we need to help out, right? So we need to have a deputy, right, appointed to make decisions for someone who's lost mental capacity. Who can appoint a deputy? Only the court. So you may not be fighting about anything, but you still need a court to give you that power as a deputy. What about when a loved one in your family dies? You need a court appointment again to give you the power to be an executor if there's a will, or to obtain letters of administration if there's no will, so that you can act and distribute the estate of the loved one. A divorce is not something that you can get at the ROM. Right? You go to ROM to get married. You don't go to ROM to get a divorce. Right? There is no way you can get a divorce administratively. So what do? You've got to go to court. And so what am I saying? What I'm saying is that really families come before the family court for many reasons, because they go through stages in the family life cycle. And it is not necessary that parties are going to court to fight for a right. You go to court for some other reason. And this reason could be that there is a transition in your life. You need to rearrange your life in a new way. And in some of these issues, only the court can help you to do that. What then does the family court do? Right? Does it just help you to make arrangements, appoint these things? Is there something more than that? Well, let us first begin with this concept of divorce. My good friend and former mentor when I was teaching in NUS, Professor Leong and I wrote in an earlier article, we wrote this: divorce should be no worse than a reorganization of a family member's living arrangements, and the divorced spouses should still be able to continue to discharge their parental responsibilities with some degree of cooperation. What do we mean by this? I think that this sentence, if I may say so, is really very rich. There's a lot packed into this. What needs to be done when you divorce? See, for most of us, when you're really hurt and you are going through a divorce, I think all you see is hurt and pain, really. But there are practical things as well. What do you need to do when you go through a divorce? Obviously, your household has broken down. So there are at least 3 things we got to take care of. First, how will the children be cared for? We still have children. Who will they live with? How will the assets that we have, right, our matrimonial home, be divided since we can't live together anymore? What are we going to do about that? What about those who are financially dependent? So a homemaker spouse, right, will still need money. What happens when they are divorced? Who will pay the children's expenses? So there are at least these 3 things that we need to address. These 3 areas are addressed in what we refer to as ancillary matters. When you hear the courts or law students or lawyers say AMs, it's because we like acronyms. AMs really mean ancillary matters. There are 3 AMs that will follow upon the court's grant of divorce. 3. The first is custody, care, and control, access to the children. When a marriage breaks down and divorce ensues, the family can no longer live together, but the children need to be cared for, and they need to be able to still have a normal childhood, and they need to have the love of both parents. As far as they're concerned, they're not divorced, yeah? Their parents are divorced. So how do we make sure that they can continue being loved and to feel that both their parents continue to love them so much that they can sort of cooperate? Can they love them beyond their hurts and pain? So the law on custody, care, and control gives a structure, right, to the fresh arrangements where the parents can continue to be a parent, to discharge the responsibility. The second ancillary matter is the division of matrimonial assets. When spouses part from each other, their assets also need to be split up. The law on the division of assets in the Women's Charter allows assets that have been acquired during marriage to be split up in a just and equitable manner. Now, you might be thinking, the breadwinner will probably be earning the money and bringing in the assets. What about the homemaker? Well, do we recognize the homemaker's efforts? Yes, of course. And the law on the division of assets recognizes both parties' financial and non-financial contributions. Now, as parties accumulate wealth or accumulate assets throughout marriage, what's happening is their contributions are being translated into economic assets, right? So at the end of marriage, at the end of this marriage partnership, when you're going to sort of break up a partnership, these economic assets must also be split up. How we do it in family law is to recognize the contributions of both to the marriage, to the assets, and we divide up in a way that is most equitable. And when you divide up assets, what you're also doing is we're also providing them a clean break, right? They can get whatever they should be entitled to and then start a new life. Right? Now, this concept of a new life is going to be quite important as I go on and share with you more thoughts. But first, I go on to the third AM, maintenance of children. Of course, a spouse who is dependent can also obtain maintenance. Obviously, you know that children clearly need to be maintained, right? They are vulnerable, and both parents are obliged to provide for them financially. Now, how best to provide for children is really a parenting matter, right? I mean, why should the court tell you whether your kid should go for tuition, ballet, and so forth? It's really a parenting matter, right? We do hear cases where we are asked, should my child go to primary school is a different matter in Singapore, preschool A or preschool B? How does the court know what's best for your child? You have aspirations for your child. You want the child to be, inclined to be a musician. You go to a certain school that emphasizes on music and so forth. What does the court know? We are not the parents. So if I may say so, I would say that parenting matters are really not for the court. But, well, if parties cannot resolve such matters, the court has to break the deadlock and do its best. So you see, in family proceedings, when we look at these AMs, we see that family justice isn't about obtaining compensation for a breach of a right. It is really about assisting parties to transit into the next phase of their life. It is forward-looking. Right? So these 3 and 3 matters are looking ahead. How do we provide? What do we do, right, when this marriage has broken down? Compare this with non-family civil suits. The court in the civil proceedings typically would examine what has happened in the past, right? You would provide evidence to the court, tell the court that, I had a contract and then he didn't perform it, he didn't give me this and then blah, blah, blah. Or I had a road accident and there's skid marks. So we're just looking and examining the evidence that had happened. It's about the past. In family proceedings, it's really about the future, looking ahead. We also do not want parties to look back to the past too much and relive their hurts and pains all over again. Right? And, I don't think it's easy to say that, no matter what my ex-spouse says to me, I will be nice. When they say something nasty, I will still be nice. It's just not human nature. A nasty comment will hurt, and you would thus be inviting a nasty comment back. So this acrimonious adversarial stance is not going to help children. It's not going to de-escalate conflict. In family proceedings, family relationships continue long after the court has made its orders. Compare this with opposing parties in civil litigation. When the court has given judgment, they part. Right? They go their own ways, unless they're also family members. Family proceedings, though, are different, and so we must deal with family disputes in a sensitive way. We must be sensitive because we want to preserve the bedrock of the relationship that they should have, and they had, and should continue to have. And if we adopt a notion of family justice that is only about vindication of rights, then, looking forward, recasting your future positively is going to be that much harder. So family justice is much more than that, much more than just vindication of rights. Now, as family proceedings have these special features that I've talked to you about, we cannot simply adopt an adversarial approach. What is an adversarial approach? For those of us who are familiar, the adversarial approach to litigation is such that both parties are entitled to just look at their own interests, present their best case to the court, pursue their own interests single-mindedly to win at all costs. And you're allowed to do that. So the idea is that the truth will come out if each one is allowed to give their best cases, and then we look, right? The court will just look at the evidence and so forth, and then give a determination. Now, if spouses are allowed to do that, can you imagine? Can you imagine that spouses are allowed to make nasty allegations against the other and say how good they are and how bad the other one is? And then after that, when everything is ended, we're going to say, well, now you better move on, and you've got to be cooperative parents, cooperate and raise your children together. It's very hard to do that after 1 to 2 years of such bickering and such fighting. So what we need is a system of therapeutic justice. We call it TJ for short. TJ is a lens of care. And through this lens, we examine the extent to which rules, laws, procedures, practices, as well as the roles of the legal participants, and that would be the parties themselves, and the lawyers, the judges, the court administrators, produce harmful or helpful consequences to support the family in moving forward. In other words, it is a conscious effort at looking at all the things, the whole journey, to see if every step that we take produces harmful or helpful effects. And we want to make sure that we produce the helpful effects. Seen in this light, the family court is the place for problem solving and resolution, not a battlefield. Now, you ask this question perhaps, is TJ kind of a idealistic thought? How can people who already hate each other so much and want to divorce cooperate and think about their future together? How do you do that? Well, our highest court, the Court of Appeal, has said in its judgment, it's not an option, it's not a choice. Therapeutic justice, right, is not merely an ideal, it is a necessity, quote unquote, the Court of Appeal. And it is intensely practical. Why? Because relationships constitute the very pith and marrow of a family. And when familial relationships break down, those relationships are damaged and healing needs to take place. Healing needs to take place in order that parties can find a way forward. Indeed, our family law is really rich in legal principles and jurisprudence that promote therapeutic outcomes. And I will share with you this. Our family jurisprudence is strong in reflecting our commitment to building a TJ system. And this TJ system would support healing. I have shared a little bit about the AMs, and now I go a little bit further into it. And this is a little bit more subtle. Right? I'm going to show you that the law on the 3 AMs support TJ outcomes because of the expectations of how you conduct yourself and how you conduct the processes towards your what you seek. So first, division of assets. As I mentioned earlier, when the court divides assets, the court is aiming for a just and equitable split of the assets. Now, the legal framework is such that the court is obliged to look at the contributions of both parties, but it exercises its power in broad strokes, broad brush. And when you hear the word broad brush, what does it mean? It means you are not overly calculative, overly mathematical, and therefore overly petty. We want a system that disincentivizes parties from being rigid, using a very mathematical approach and being calculative. Now, you might hear me say that, don't be calculative, but in the cases, you really do see it. I mean, parties will say that I paid another $3,000 in for this and that, and therefore you should calculate everything all over again because I deserve, 0.5% more of the assets. And it really means a lot to them. And they can't let go of that. And they get very angry when they can't get that little bit. So it's just, being mired in that detail and being calculative and being very petty. Now, in an adversarial system, the court does carry out a forensic examination of relevant past events, right? The court in a civil case also can mathematically calculate compensation, how much medical expenses you spend and how much you deserve in damages and so forth. But it is really quite impossible, and I would say not desirable, to conduct such a similar forensic examination in family proceedings because what you are conducting an examination of is an intimate relationship like marriage. Looking back at what people did in their intimate relationship and putting sort of dollars and cents into that. This is a quote from this decision. It was highlighted here that the court must bear in mind that findings on the parties' contributions are necessarily impressionistic. So broad brush, broad strokes. Look at it in the big picture. And the court can only have sight of a portion of all that had occurred during the marriage. The court will not be able to reach with mathematical specificity each party's contributions for the entire length of the marriage. And this is especially true for long marriages, as the court's finding on the parties' contributions cannot fully reflect all that goes into building a life together, nor will it be likely that records of transactions will remain completely available by the time of the divorce. Allowing parties to be calculative over every sum they had contributed throughout their long years of marriage does not sit well with the philosophy of marriage, nor with divorce proceedings that endeavor to support parties towards an amicable resolution and conclusion to this phase of their family life. So what I'm saying is, if we were to really adopt the civil method of litigation, where they have pleadings and they submit evidence, you actually have to have a journal of every day of the parties' 30 years of marriage. Then it is an accurate assessment. But if you're going to be selective, you're going to tell me bits here and bits there, all in about this thick, and that's not 30 years of your life, then it's a very selective glimpse of it. And I think that it will do more harm, right, to be calculative based on selected parts of your life than to take a broad brush approach. And the consequence then also is that you can tell parties not to be petty and calculative. Take a broad brush approach. What about the maintenance of children? We also take a very practical and sensible approach. Very common, and I think for family lawyers here, you send us list of the children's expenses and the spouse's expenses, right? Groceries, pedicures, manicures as well, medicines, vitamins, ballet classes, and so on. So it's a long list. Now, if we were to go through every item and decide ballet should only cost $60 a month, and then there's also ballet shoes, and during exam time for ballet, they have to wear new shoes, right, those parents, and so they have to buy new shoes for exam, so there'll be exam ballet shoes. So it's a long list of expenses. And if we were to go through and check them one by one, it's getting really petty and calculative. And I always say, there's only one certainty, that every month your expenditure cannot be the same as the previous. I challenge you that every month you spend the exact amount of money, dollars and cents. It cannot be. So how can we also be so accurate in deciding the amount of maintenance that a child needs and so forth? Right? So we would be guided by the broad categories, and then we will say, look, this is it. For enrichment or something, $500. Whether it's ballet this month, swimming next month, you got a budget. This budget approach. Right? And this is also a message to the parents. You are parents. You sort it out. Please don't come to court and ask, should she take ballet or violin? I've been asked that in court also. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. So, you can see then that even in maintenance, we are going for an approach that is less calculative. That actually places responsibility on the parents. You've got a budget, sort it out. And don't keep coming back to court every time something changes. Now, one other thing is certain, besides you never spending the same amount of money, when your children grow, their needs and their expenses must change. Surely cannot remain the same from the time they are a baby till the time they are 21. Cannot be. Now, every time your needs change, do you want to come back to court and ask the court all over again how much maintenance should be paid? I've got this quote here. A maintenance order may be varied if there's a material change in circumstances. Of course, if your child grows up, goes to another school, new needs. So theoretically, you can come to court. It is expected that the exact amounts a child will need will change over time. And I tell the parties this. Now, if parents file court proceedings for variation, every time there is a change, there is something precious that we will have lost in our society. Because parenting is to be carried out cooperative. Your first port of call should not be the court. It should be sorting out each other. And maybe for those of you who are from the social service sector, they should go to you. Ask you to guide them and help them to see what their problems are and what their real issues are and help them sort them out. Go there, and there will be therapeutic interventions, right? Going to court really is the last resort. Litigation has harmful effects. Materially, because it's costly. You're just eating up your money for the family, really. And conflict affects the family. I have had quite a number of cases where the children do indicate somewhere, either to the child rep or to the counselors, that they can't wait for litigation to end and they can't take it anymore. And they just tell the parents, it better end, otherwise I'm going to do something silly to myself, that sort of thing. And it comes before me, and of course I feel a lot. And that is why I have such great belief and conviction in this system, because children are really affected. Finally, our precious children. What about the law on, finally, not for this whole talk, finally for this part only, finally for the 3 AMs, custody, care, and control and access. Now, these legal constructs enable the court to at least give these broad directions. Who should the child live with? Who should make important decisions for the child, in their lives? And of course, the legal principle is very simple. Yeah? So if you have an exam tonight, apparently there's an exam, family law tonight, the legal principle, you get full marks. The welfare of the child is the paramount consideration. Perfect iteration of the law. But applying the law is the hardest, the opposite of this very easy principle. What is the welfare of the child? Does the court know? Does the judge really know this child and what is in the best interest of this child? It's really hard. Applying this legal principle, it's very hard. What we look for is for parents to securely share children. Now, this comes from a social science aspect, so not an expert there, but I've read some articles. And I think securely sharing the children would mean that the child should not feel that if I go and spend a great time with dad, mom is going to be very upset. And then sometimes when I ask children, when I interview them, what does your mom say about going to your dad's for access? They say something like, she says, you want to go, you go lah. Oh. So does she stop you from going? No, she says you want to go, you go lah. I don't know what to make of that. So there's something more than just saying, yeah, you want to go for exercise, you can go. Or to really say, you're going to have a great time there. Dad and I, we've got problems, but go and have fun and really smile, a genuine one. So I think this is my understanding, my layman understanding of secure sharing, where they feel safe if they spend time with both and they do not suffer a conflict of loyalty. And with this secure sharing, we want joint parenting. So joint custody should be the norm. And when it comes to care and control or access, really as much time as is practicable with both parties. Obviously, it cannot be mathematically equal amounts of time. I mean, when you had to work from home and work from office, it's a little bit tricky already to have 2 homes. So for a child to have 2 homes all the time with their homework being left in one home, it's not that simple. So, where are we now? Well, I've just talked about the 3 AMs. And I think that what we can see from this is that the legal jurisprudence supports a TJ approach. Now, not only does the legal jurisprudence support the TJ approach, but the family justice system works really hard to deliver TJ. And what do we have? Well, in FJC, we've worked with this sort of approach. Yeah? Our system adopts a problem-solving approach. And we believe that parties are best placed to decide on their personal matters. So what does the court do? The court plays a part in this coordinated system, right? Where the parties can be helped to gain understanding about their real issues, what really bothers them, what their needs are, own their problems, and have support in working out things, right, for the family. So upstream, before any filings are made in court as well. So the court won't see this part, right? Upstream. Parties have access to lawyers, therapeutic lawyers, counselors, mediators, therapeutic community services. And at this stage upstream, we hope that they can understand their real needs. Right? They can see that conflict is bad for the children and so forth. So that would be the upstream aim. Now, downstream, even if they are filing applications or divorce, a problem-solving approach, right, is taken, not a warring approach. Right? We use the judge-led approach, and FJC also has a unit. We call it It's CAPS, CAPS, Counseling and Psychological Services. So our CAPS unit, right, is an in-house unit which houses our counselors. They come from the mental health field, right, professional psychologists, so forth, and they are the ones who would be conducting mediation and counseling as well, especially when there are children involved. They will help to identify issues, needs, facilitate support. Now, another important aspect of our TJ system is that the environment is multidisciplinary. And that is why, look at the audience here, multidisciplinary as well, because you are really important. What does multidisciplinary mean? Well, first of all, we recognize that the breakdown of family relationships isn't just a legal issue, right? It's non-legal as well as legal, right? Mixture. Right? And it can be quite complex. We also want insights from those who are experts in other disciplines to inform us, because we are legal experts in the courts, and we want professionals to help us understand the issues. So with this, we have the FJC. We say we have piloted the panel of therapeutic specialists as well as the panel of financial experts. Now, these are panels. When we sort of got them together, these are those from the private sector, so that the parties can have some channel where they can just easily contact specialized therapeutic services, or they can have a financial expert make an objective assessment of their matrimonial assets instead of fighting about how to value assets. So these are just resources. They can agree, and the court can say, well, if you like, you can have it. So what we're doing, you can see, is this. We don't just say, okay, go and find this and go and find that. We try to put them together. We try to ask if these panels can, charge a slightly lower fee, so that the parties can have access. Yeah? It's not a court-mandated thing, but it's there, right? We can have access. Another thing I'd like to share really that's really important for us in building this multidisciplinary environment is our CAPS counselors, our psychologists. Well, they are called family specialists. They are called counselors. They are a bridge, and I see some of my colleagues here. They are a bridge. So when we make orders, for example, that this parent must be supervised when this parent is seeing the child, right? CAPS will coordinate with an external agency. So what the court really means, what the court intends, and they will be carrying out, for example, these visitations, these access orders. Right? So the child and the parent may go to an FSC and spend 2 hours there in a nice playroom with toys and all that, and have access there. And we will also ask for a report, so if they're doing well, or if there are issues. And our CAPS officers will be that bridge with the external agencies. I think that has been really valuable for us and for everyone. And third, the other distinct mark of our TJ system is that TJ in the family justice system takes a forward-looking approach. Right? By forward-looking, we mean that presently we want to help parties to heal and then adjust to their new lives ahead. When they are off on their own after the court orders are done, they will need to know how to manage future conflicts. So TJ also includes equipping them with the skills to manage future conflicts, future issues. It's quite all-inclusive. Right? So TJ seeks to also equip parties with skills to manage challenges ahead as well. And in a space where they continue to be good parents, they can carry out their family responsibilities. So instead of the civil approach of allocating rights and penalizing past wrong, blame, wrong, you got to pay this and that, or criminal law, send you to jail. Instead of that, TJ in the family justice system focuses on helping the family to move forward. And when we do that, we must have a system that is non-adversarial if possible, or at least less adversarial to the highest degree possible. That is the only way they can see ahead and be nice to each other and to see a better future. I think it gives hope. TJ gives hope. We are, or the Family Justice Courts, is at a transformative time. We're implementing a lot of our TJ ideas. They're really very busy, the family judges. I must say this too, that our laws, our rules, our systems are really important. But what's equally important would be the collective effort and commitment of every stakeholder. We need the family lawyers, the social science, the social workers, the counselors, everyone, right, to come together in this multidisciplinary environment to do this. And for the younger ones, some law students who are here, you are the future family lawyers. You've grown up in this system. I know Prof. Leong in SUSS has a large part of the syllabus devoted to TJ and so forth. And I think that if you embrace that, imbibe that, I think you're going to have a really meaningful job, a wonderful, wonderful job. You know, young people like passion in their career, and this is really good. Lots of passion here and lots of meaningfulness here as well. So I take this time also to thank all of you who are part of this family justice system. We look forward to a fruitful discussion. And thank you all of you who represent the drivers of our very special family justice system. Thank you.